Before I begin, I have to give our standard disclaimer, which basically the views I express today are solely my own. They don't represent the commission, other people, the staff, or the commissioners. Um, I'm really excited to be participating in the summit and that the Department of Justice is hosting such an important gathering. I want to emphasize how significant I view our partnerships with local law enforcement and other regulators in working together to investigate and stop fraudulent conduct, particularly conduct that targets vulnerable groups such as senior citizens. I assume that some of you are familiar with the SEC, if nothing else, because we're at our headquarters. And I know that you are all familiar with our security process. I heard things went more smoothly this morning. Our mission at the SEC is to protect investors, to maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and to facilitate capital formation. In the Division of Enforcement, we investigate violations of the securities laws. Some can be sophisticated, complicated, and technical, but some are really just garden variety fraud. We are a civil law enforcement agency, but we very often work in parallel with federal criminal prosecutors as well as state prosecutors. If there is one takeaway I'm hoping that people get from my speaking today, is that if you come across financial exploitation in your work, it may very well be something that the SEC is interested in, and you should reach out to us. Not all financial exploitation is necessarily under our jurisdiction, which extends only to schemes involving securities. But if you come across wrongdoing involving what we commonly think of as an investment, which would include an individual or a company saying to somebody, if you give me money, I'm going to use it to generate more money, which I will pay you in returns, you are likely in our realm. Unfortunately, it is fair to say that we see elderly victims quite often in our investigations, and it is heartbreaking. We see fraudsters preying on the vulnerability of elderly investors, as well as the nest eggs that they've spent their lives building. To give you some idea of the types of enforcement matters I've worked on that have involved elderly victims, in 2017, the SEC brought fraud charges against 13 individuals involved in a telemarketing boiler room scheme with over 100 victims, losing more than $10 million. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York also brought parallel criminal charges. The scheme orchestrators set up boiler room style call centers to make hundreds of thousands of cold calls to victims, many of whom were senior citizens, to pressure them into purchasing penny stocks. In a typical phone call, the telemarketers would direct victims to place trades and tell them how many shares to purchase and at what price. And with this information about the victim's trades, the orchestrators and boiler room sales personnel then placed opposing trades, sell orders to dump their shares, and in doing so made $14 million in profits. To understand just how callous these individuals can be, when one of the victims complained about his losses, a sales representative told him, "I am tired of hearing from you. Do you have any rope at home? If so, tie a knot and hang yourself, or get a gun and blow your head off." Our action and the action of the criminal authorities shut down the boiler room and resulted in the criminal convictions of the defendants. Since 2019, investigations by my team involving offering frauds, all of which had some victims who were senior citizens, have resulted in at least 6 enforcement actions. In these types of frauds, the defendants promised the victims they would use their money in all types of business ventures, including a mobile gaming platform, mineral mining, cryptocurrency mining, oil, gas, biofuel, and marijuana. In many of these matters, the investment took the form of a promissory note in which the victims loaned the defendant or the enterprise, say, for example, $50,000, and the defendant promised to pay the victim regular investment returns, usually very high and above market rate for a fixed period, at the end of which the defendant was to return the victim's investment principal. Despite the defendant telling the victims that their money would be used to operate the business, instead, we've seen the defendants misappropriate a substantial amount of the funds for their personal expenses and to fund their lifestyles, and to use investor funds to pay earlier investors in a typical Ponzi scheme. Investors received minimal investment returns, given that there was no profitable business from which to generate those returns, and most lost their principal as well. I mention these because I want to give you the kind of flavor for a fact pattern which you might come across that the SEC would be interested in. Another important thing I want to emphasize is that with this type of fraud we see, it is rarely limited to a single victim, but usually involves hundreds, if not thousands of victims. So when something comes across your desk, it may involve a much wider pool of victims, sometimes nationally or globally, that you're only seeing a small piece of within your jurisdiction. We are here to make those broader connections. In terms of reaching out to us, I will include my contact information at the end. But for folks that are not aware, in the enforcement division, we actually have FBI officers that are embedded on detail. So if you're trying to reach the SEC, particularly if you want to know whether the SEC is aware of something or is investigating it, that's always a good place to start. So there are a couple additional very practical tools that I want to point out to you. First, I think some of you might be familiar with our Office of Investor Education and Advocacy, and I want to put a huge plug out for this really, really important office. I know that included within your materials was one of their investor alerts, spotting and reporting investment scams targeting older investors. The Office of Investor Education and Advocacy, they put out lots of guidance and investor alerts, and it is worth taking a look at some of them because they can alert you to some of the financial scams that we are seeing, so that if similar facts present themselves to you, you'll have some idea of what you're dealing with. A few other resources and tools that I want to make you aware of that I think could be incredibly helpful for your work. Many times in fraud cases, we see individuals claiming that they are registered with the SEC or that the investment they are selling is registered with the SEC. So on sec.gov, our homepage, there's a link toward the bottom of the landing page right next to the investor alerts and bulletins that says check your investment professional. And clicking on that takes you to a page where you can search a database of all registered investment professionals. This would include individuals associated with both broker-dealers and investment advisors. And if someone's claiming they are registered and you cannot find them in that database, that could very well be a red flag to follow up on. Additionally, if the individual is in fact registered, you can see what, if any, disciplinary history the person has. Finally, I mentioned that not only will individuals claim they're registered with the SEC or with FINRA or with some other regulator, but they'll also say that the investment they're selling has been registered and vetted by the SEC. If the SEC has some oversight over an entity, you can also check that on sec.gov, our website, by searching our EDGAR system, which stands for Electronic Data Gathering, Analysis, and Removal. You can reach EDGAR from the sec.gov landing page and click on the tab at the top of the page titled Filings. I think it's important to note that these systems can be somewhat sensitive, so there could be a reasonable explanation for why something doesn't come up when you search it. But if someone is claiming that the SEC has approved of their investment in some way and you can't find anything about it on EDGAR, that very well may also be a red flag to follow up on. And then finally, in that same vein, I want to flag for you all something that comes up quite frequently. Someone may claim that they're registered with the SEC or that their investment is registered with the SEC, and you may do a search, or they might direct you or victims to a document on the SEC's website. We see this, and this document is usually what's called a Form D. A Form D is not a securities registration. In fact, it is exactly the opposite. It is a form that folks file when they are claiming that the investment they're selling does not need to be registered because it meets an exemption from registration. These Form Ds get filed and placed in the Edgar system, but it's important to note they are not vetted by the SEC. But we have seen folks pointing to these to mislead investors into thinking that the SEC has done so. So just be aware and remember the term Form D. Thank you all for your attention and participation in this conference. I know that our director gave you his email yesterday, but take mine as well. It is friedmana@sec.gov. And if going forward you see anything that you have a question about, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to assist.
Thanks so much, Amy. And we will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So please hold your questions. And once we're through the panel, then there will be plenty of opportunity for you all to speak up. But thank you very much, Amy, for the helpful information. We will now move on to the second panelist, Patty Poss, who's a Senior Fraud Advisory Office Coordinator, Division of Consumer Response and Operations, Bureau of Consumer Protection for the Federal Trade Commission. Take it away, Patty.
Thanks, Rich. Oops. There we go. Hi, everyone. So I have to give the same disclaimer that Amy gave, which is, while I work for the Federal Trade Commission, I can't speak on behalf of the views are my own, and I can't speak on behalf of the commission itself or any commissioners. But I'm really happy to be here. It's been a terrific conference. I was here yesterday, too, and talked to a lot of people at our booth, which are the last table. The FTC has the last table at the end of out in the lobby there. Please stop by. Several of the things I'm going to mention today, there's hard copies there. But I also have my contact information at the end of this, and there's links throughout. And these materials are on the website, so in the PowerPoint slides. So hopefully you don't have to write anything down, but if you want to, you can. But you also don't have to worry about picking up paper. So I work for the Federal Trade Commission. We're a civil law enforcement agency. We bring cases, we combat fraud and scams and bad business practices. We also have a competition mission. I'm going to talk about the consumer protection work that we're doing. And mostly what I want to talk about today is what resources we have that might be available, that might help you do that. So I have several. It's going to be about our reporting database, our aggregate data that you can access, and lots of education materials. I really didn't bring a lot of education materials, but you can see some on the table out in the other in the lobby. So the FTC receives millions of reports every year. I mean, this is the number from, I think this is 2023 still, our 2022 data, but it's, 5.4 million reports in that 1 year. Now, those are a lot of different reports. They're reports that come into our websites, our reporting websites. They're also reports that come in from our federal partners like the CFPB and others. They're reports that come from the Better Business Bureaus and other private entities. The IC3 folks contribute their reports. All these reports come into something we call the Consumer Sentinel Network. And there's a lot of rich data in there. And when you look, there were 2.6 million fraud reports in just that 1 year. Not all of them contain losses, the reports, though. We have a lot of folks who are really good at telling us what's going on. They're just filing a no loss report. We saw this thing. It looks like a scam. We want you to know about it, which is terrific information for us to have and for you to have access to. So how do you get access to it? So while we collect these reports from all these various agencies and private entities, only law enforcement can have access to the system. So this is an online tool. This is the web page where you can go to sign up for it. It's register.consumersentinel.gov. Your organization may already be a member of Sentinel. If your organization is already a member, it's very easy for you to become an individual user. If your organization isn't, the third option there on the right is how to get your organization set up. I'm going to share with you a little more information about what's in that database. We have a lot of police departments, county departments that are using our system to look for things. We also have police departments and other criminal law enforcement contributing. And so there's two ways, and I'll talk about that. But what I want to talk about right now is how do you get access to use for your investigations and work that you're doing. So this site will provide, the Consumer Sentinel Network provides access to all these kinds of fraud reports that I was talking about. So if you want to see what was going on, or if you want to hear about, is this type of thing a scam, it's a great way for you to look and see what's going on in your area. How would you see that? So here, once you get your login and you get the access, it's a secure online database. So you log in, and this is the screen that you would see for searching for potential cases in your area or other investigative work. On this slide, you can see on the left, this is what we call our advanced search function. You can choose the fraud complaints, do not call complaints, or identity theft reports. But if you go into the fraud reports, I'm just showing you an example here of the kinds of things you can search on. You can search by date, you can search by the name of the target or the company name. And you also can, I don't know if you can totally see it there, but you can search by your zip code area. So while I said this is a national database, right? We have reports from all these various jurisdictions. You care about the area that you work in. So you can put in and search for complaints about companies or entities that are in your zip code area, your city, your county, your state, and the results will come up. You also could just search on a company name and see what else somebody else has been saying about that company. And how do you do that? So once you put in your search results, this is an example of what you might get back. And you can sort through. Down at the bottom there are lots of the start of the various reports that came back from your search. And you can go through and start to read about those. Or you can narrow it further, saying you only want to look at the reports that contained losses, where the consumer reported that they lost money. And I'll tell you that often those are the most rich reports, right? Because someone who's lost money now is going to be able to maybe help you with a follow the money trail, which can be very helpful. So that's the basics of how to what Sentinel is. I really hope if you get nothing else out of this conference, you consider signing up for this. And again, there's a sheet on our table, but the link for how to do it was on that previous slide. Okay, what if you don't want to do the Sentinel access? We also have on our website publicly available aggregated data about what we have in our Consumer Sentinel network. So this is on our website, ftc.gov/explore data. Anybody can use this. This is public data. You can go in, and this is this template, which I am showing there, will show you what have we been hearing from the people in the various parts of the United States. So you can see here, this is I think it's based on the number of reports per thousands of people who live in each of these states. And the darker the green, the more reports per 1,000 people there are, obviously. None of those states are white. You see that? None of them. That means we have reports for every one of your states that are there. And this is an overall slide that's showing about what we see across the country. And it shows you on the left, the top fraud reports for across the country. And on the bottom right, the fraud losses that coincide with those reports. So in particular, this one, and the other thing I should show you, this is pulling in real-time data. When you go to ftc.gov explore data, so in the upper right, you can see that I've chosen, this is the data for last year, so it's the last 3 quarters. We're about to get the 4th quarter loaded in, and you'll be able to see for the entire year, but you can pick and choose how many years you want. As soon as you click that, it's going to pull the data in real time. Now, for most of you, you don't care about the whole, well, you might care about the whole country, but what you really care about is what's going on in my state or my locale. So this is an example. If you drill in and you click on, for instance, Texas, what did we receive from people who said they lived in Texas? And here it is. This is the top 10 fraud reports that are coming in those 3 quarters in 2023. What were the top categories of the fraud? How much lost? So if you're putting together a grant application, for instance, maybe even to DOJ, and you want to show what are you seeing for problems for your state, you want to have that data, you don't have to call us. You can get it. You're welcome to, but you can get it in real time off of this website. And some of you would say, well, I work not for the whole state. I am in a smaller jurisdiction. even on our aggregate data public site, a lot of the metropolitan areas are there. So you see the various metropolitan areas. Most states have at least one or more metropolitan areas, and you could do a click on it and drill down to see. So for instance, I clicked, I think, on Kansas City. Yeah, the Kansas City metropolitan area, and it's under that box, but you can get the data, the aggregate data. So if you're running a program in that area and you want to be able to say what's going on, what are the number, how much money have people reported losing in the last year or whatever time period, you can get that data. Okay. And then I want to briefly give you a couple other pieces of information. Every year, the Federal Trade Commission is required to submit a report to Congress that talks about what have we done in the last year to help protect older adults. It includes information about our law enforcement. It includes information about our outreach. This section of the report that I'm flagging is research. It's what does our data say? And we always slice and dice it in lots of different ways. But I wanted to share with you a couple of high-level findings, because I know we've been talking about a lot about problems affecting older adults. I want to be really clear. Everybody is at risk of fraud. Everybody. No one should feel ashamed if they've fallen for a fraud. These scammers are very, very good. We heard several stories already of they are very good, and they like to catch you off guard, and anyone can be a victim. And it's just really important that we keep that in mind. What we look at it, and in fact, our data shows that older adults are great at telling us about frauds they didn't fall for. We get a lot of reports from older adults telling us about something they saw that looked suspicious. We also get a lot of reports from younger people saying they've lost money. In fact, we get the most reports from young people younger than 60, saying they lost money to a scam or a fraud. The difference is when it gets to older adults, when they do lose money, they lose a lot of money, disproportionately. That's the issue. And I think that's why we hear so much about it. And that's obviously very concerning. This slide here is showing you, when we slice and dice the data, what ones are what are the top fraud types by dollars lost that we get from older adults, people who've told us they're 60 or older when they filed their report. And you can see there, the top one, when it's dollar loss, was actually investment scams. And business impersonators, these are the, you get the email that says you have an order with Amazon and they want you to call, and you didn't place an order, and they're trying to get you involved in a scam. Romance scams, government impersonator scams. These are the ones that used to be a lot of them about pretending to be the IRS. Now it's the SSA. It's all kinds of agencies, including the Federal Trade Commission. There's a lot of those scams. The tech support scams, those are the computer repair scams where they're calling and saying something's wrong with your computer. Online shopping, prize, sweepstakes, and lottery scams. Online shopping scams, fake check. These are all the top dollar loss scams for older adults that we are getting information about. I hope I'm okay on time. Then I just want to briefly show you our reporting sites. So anyone can report fraud, scams, and bad business practices to the FTC. This is our reporting site. It's reportfraud.ftc.gov. This is available in English and Spanish, and you click on report now and it takes you through and gets the information. It walks you through what type it is, and even if you don't know what type it is, you can choose something else and it'll sort it for you. This site is available in Spanish also, and we added this year, there's a drop down there for other languages. If you have someone who's trying to report a fraud or a scam in another language, they can now call a line, or the phone number will come up when you click on languages, and there'll be interpreters that can take the reports in many different languages. We also have our identitytheft.gov site. If you haven't used this, I know a lot of you have, because I talked to you yesterday about sending people to the identitytheft.gov website to get an identity theft report. So a lot of people will get a report with the local law enforcement, but they can also get one from the identity theft website. This website will take them through the steps, ask them what information was compromised or what is the problem, and then it will generate a recovery plan based on the information provided, and it will also generate that identity theft report that the consumer can then use. And quickly, our free education materials. As I said, we have quite a few. These are the key ones. I told several people about this. The one I love in particular is what to do if you were scammed. And it sounds similar to what somebody else mentioned. This is available at ftc.gov/scams. But the what to do if you were scammed is the one that includes information like if you paid by a credit card, this is what you do. If you paid by a debit card, here's what to do. If you paid by a Google gift card, what are all the company names? Where should I be sending the person to report it to that company? If I paid by Western Union or MoneyGram, what should I do? It breaks it up by that. It's a really great piece. And these materials are now available in 12 different languages. We also have our signature campaign for older adults, which is Pass It On. I know a lot of you talked about doing outreach. One of the key things we see is that talking about frauds and scams, reminding people about frauds and scams, getting those conversations going about frauds and scams is really helpful. It tends to fall off the radar. You go to one training and then it kind of falls off the radar. But the more it's present in your mind and you're thinking about it, we have seen that people who have heard of a scam or at least particular scams are much less likely to respond to them. Same with people who hang up the phone and ask somebody else about the scam. They're much less likely to engage with the scam. And that's kind of the nature of our Pass It On program. Okay, and then lastly, there is our bulk order site. All of you, anyone can get free materials from the FTC. These are our hard copy print materials. You go to bulkorder.ftc.gov. They'll deliver as many as you want. The shipping is free. The publications are free. It just takes a few weeks to get them to you. And lastly, if you want to stay tuned in to what's going on, what are the top scams, what are the kind of the scammy things that are happening, you can sign up for our consumer alerts at ftc.gov/consumer alerts. We also have a Facebook page where you can, kind of be tuned into we put out alerts on the top scams that we're seeing and problems that we're seeing. I think I did it on time.
Thanks, Patty.
And there's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out if something didn't make sense. If you want to sign up for Sentinel and you're having any troubles, there's an email address there, but I'm happy to hear from you and help you get connected.
Thanks very much, Patty. Really appreciate all the information. Quick survey. How many people have access to Consumer Sentinel? Okay, so if you are ever doing financial fraud investigations of these sorts of scams, tech support, romance, the kinds of financial elder fraud schemes that we're talking about, it is actually, my humble opinion, malpractice to not use Consumer Sentinel data. It is going to contain a wealth of information that is going to be helpful for you in your investigation to connect a victim that you've identified with other victims out there. And chances are those other victims have information that your victim doesn't. So you can connect together webs, see how big it is, and then potentially find other law enforcement. Also, we're going to go through now a number of different resources that are available for reporting as part of presentations by Jennifer as well as Rachel. It is crucial to get victims to report to these federal databases. They may ask you why. Does that mean I'm going to get my money back? You obviously can't guarantee anybody's going to spur an investigation, anybody's going to get their money back. But when we're looking to try and identify the largest schemes that are out there so that we know how to devote our resources at the federal level, these are the resources we look to determine what the biggest scams are. We look at suspicious activity reports and we look at consumer complaints so that we know this is where we need to devote our resources. So thank you very much. It's very helpful information for everybody to know about that.
Thanks for the endorsement too.
Yeah, of
Great.
course, anytime. So we will move on to Jennifer Duane, who's a senior program analyst at the Office of Older Americans for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Take it away, Jennifer.
Push button. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and really grateful to Andy and Shelley and your team for all the work you did producing this stellar event. Amazing. Before I say another word, I need to do the same thing. But you can have a quick peek at this. It's basically the same as Amy and Patty said. Basically, any opinions or views stated by me, the presenter, are my views alone and may not represent the Bureau's views. Okay, and this is me, and the reason I threw this up here, you may not recognize me as a matter of fact, is that my contact information is at the bottom. And I made a large deck just so that you would have a lot of resources because I don't have time to get through everything. So we'll move forward. And so what I'm going to talk about very briefly today is I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Office for Older Americans. I'm going to do a quick light touch on suspicious activity reports, talk briefly about building collaboration between law enforcement and financial institutions concerning SARS, and then there are a lot of resources at the end that I may not get to, but at least you'll have them in the slides online. Okay, so the introduction to the CFPB. We help older consumers make sound financial decisions as they age. That's what we work to do. We identify and address emerging consumer protection risks, help older adults recognize warning signs of frauds and scams, unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices in the financial marketplace, coordinate consumer protection efforts on behalf of older adults with other federal agencies, our partners here, and others. To promote consistent, effective, and efficient enforcement. We also develop a lot of resources for older people, family members, financial caregivers, the financial services industry, elder justice networks such as MDTs, FAST, coalitions, task forces, elder justice alliances. We call them networks. You can find others on our website. We have lots of publications out on a table out here. So help yourself to those, and others are on our website at consumerfinance.gov. And I just want to mention that our Assistant Director, Deborah Royster, is here today along with my partner in crime prevention, Lisa Schifferly. I don't know where you are, Lisa, but we'll be back at the table afterwards. We also take complaints at the Bureau on financial products and services. And if we do receive a complaint that it doesn't seem like it's in our wheelhouse, we will refer to FTC, or and our consumer response team is trained to also recognize elder financial exploitation and to refer appropriately to the right agencies in the community, and sometimes even come to us in the Office for Older Americans to say, you know, what do we do about this? Who should we report to, or how do we handle this? I'm just going to scoot forward here. Okay, so I'm going to move fast. I hope you can fasten your seatbelts. Our free resources include preventing financial exploitation, frauds, and scams. There's a list of them. We have tools for financial security. We have industry information and reports, which include recovering from elder financial exploitation, issue spotlights on nursing home debt collection, which is a pretty hot topic right now, an area of exploitation, unfortunately. Reporting of suspected elder financial exploitation by financial institutions. We have a whole section on suspicious activity reports, a study that was done some years ago, but has a lot of data that you can use, as was mentioned, possibly to work up for your grant proposals, et cetera. And then we have an issues and trends report, a data spotlight on suspicious activity reports, and then we have memorandum on suspicious activity reports. This is a memorandum on financial institution and law enforcement efforts to combat elder financial exploitation. And this will give you a quick snap overview of suspicious activity reports, what they are, who can use them, who can't use them, what you can and cannot do, and a law enforcement liaison contact at FinCEN. And we have Rich McGill here to make things even better. We have Money Smart for older adults, very popular. We have a few in the back. They're 14-point font. I assume that some of you can actually read it from the back of the room. It's really great for older people, especially myself. I really appreciate it myself. We have a small pile of the recent FinCEN advisory on elder financial exploitation that was put out on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day last year, which was really, really great. And, really kudos to FinCEN for digging in and also being such great partners with us around this work. Okay, so onwards, the Elder Justice Network Development Guide. Just going to divert for a moment. I am the lead of the Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Network program of the Bureau. It started, the work started in California a lot of years ago. I have really delighted to see some great collaboration partners and veterans of the work. We say I like to say the mother of MDTs is Lisa Nuremberg. She's here having started, 40 years ago? My goodness. So I brought some of the concepts forward, all these fabulous practices that we implemented in California and beyond. And then from the Bureau's perspective, we've been able to fan out around the country and work with new networks, older networks in various stages of development to help build their capacity and hopefully attract financial institutions to the table, bring them in to engage. And now we're still doing that because we are a financial regulator. We have the ear of almost the whole financial industry, banks, credit unions, and others. So this development guide is online, and it's kind of a soup to nuts how to form a collaborative network like an MDT, a FAST, et cetera. It also refers to justice resources. There's some great resources on developing MDTs and case review teams, et cetera. So we have a resource section that cross references other great resources. So this also has 10 forms in it that you can use to plan an event like a convening, a dynamic timeline where you can put in the date you want to get your group together and all the tasks in between, and it'll help you plan on whatever time frame you need to pull people together. If you want to pull financial institutions, law enforcement, social services, legal services, and have a discussion, this is really a kit to help you get that done. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Let's flip over to SARS real quick. How many of you are familiar with suspicious activity reports? Great. Wow. That's changed in the past few years. How many of you actually use them? Good. So I don't think I need to go too deeply into what is a SAR, but a suspicious activity report is filed by certain financial service institutions. It could be casinos, it's banks, it's credit unions, it's broker dealers, it's others. There's a list you can find at fincen.gov. I won't go too deep in the weeds about it, but they are very, very confidential source information that is only accessible by law enforcement. And I will not be able to get into a lot of detail today, but these two briefs, that the memorandums and the studies we have online will help you to know more. And of course, Rich is here. And I want to introduce also Laura. Laura, would you stand up for a moment? Laura Richardson was with FinCEN for 12 years, and she's working with us to help develop collaborative partnerships around suspicious SAR review teams. And it's kind of an exciting new way we're exploring SAR review teams that are specific to elder financial exploitation. So just quickly, let me go back.
Yes.
So in these SARs, do I have this right?
I'm not a good looking guy.
Okay, so they provide details. The SAR itself provides details on the subject who may be a suspect, but they're a subject because they haven't been, this is an early crime tip. So they're referred to as subject. Subject could also be an older person who may be a mule. I hate that word. It's sort of victim blaming, but that's the common term. Who may be engaged with a scam or a fraud, moving money. It may have the age and location of the target or a victim, the reporting entity's response, and also there's a box within the SAR where the filer, the reporter, can list a law enforcement contact if they've contacted law enforcement, or sometimes they list APS and they even put a phone number in. So you may pull a SAR and see, we could really encourage our financial institutions to fill that out if they have cross-reported, because it's very helpful in investigations to know if this person has been reported before or whatnot. There's lots of supporting documentation sometimes. There can be reference supporting documentation, which can include photos, videos, statements, signature cards, you name it. And they are required to hold that information for 5 years. And then the cross-reporting is mentioned here. Liaisons, points of contact. There's a narrative that may reference account numbers. It's very, very detailed. Usually, I have noticed, or we have noticed, that the SAR writing has gotten better and better over time. Here's a link to some resources. I just quickly moving forward. Whoops. I'm not so good at these. Okay, I want to share some kind of riveting new statistics for you. As you can see here, I'll just go back to, I started working on the SAR issue or the SAR opportunities in 2013 with FinCEN. That was the year they introduced the electronic filing form, which changed the world of SAR filing. In 2014, after 1 year of submissions of filings, there were 21,600 and a few filings, which we went, "Ooh, that's good." Next year, 25. The next year jumped to 52, then 62. It kind of held static there a little bit. And then come 2020, when the pandemic hit, we saw, sort of a flat line at 62 again, and then it jumped to 72. And now look at 2022, year before last, it jumped from 72,000 to 106,000 SARS filed on elder financial exploitation specifically. Now look where we are as of 2 weeks ago, 160,000 for 2023. And Rich McGill just mentioned that they are coming in at a rate of 2,000 a week. So this number is going to continue to rise as they're not trickling in, they are steaming in this year. So this really underscores the need for law enforcement to become more familiar with SARS, to develop partnerships with federal, state, local law enforcement, et cetera, because there's a lot of restrictions and a lot of risk around SARS, and there's a lot to know. They're not just reports that you can pull and share and talk about and all that. They are very, very tightly restricted. So we can't get into a lot about it today, but that's just want you to know that this is an area that is really emergent, and I'm so delighted to see that so many of you are aware. So they can play an important role in the fight against elder financial exploitation, provide information, documentation, support ongoing investigations, identifying new subjects and financial accounts. And of course, the FinCEN reporting specific checkbox is great. And sometimes they cross over to identity theft or other forms of money laundering. So you can really dig up. I heard a very, very harrowing story last night about how an elder financial exploitation case actually, when they followed this detective who is here, followed the money, it ended up with a weapons dealing organization was behind it all. So this is getting into some really serious business here. National security can be involved, et cetera. So that's why they are very, very tightly regulated. And it requires very sort of intense collaboration. I'm just going to wrap up really quick here. You can read up on all of this. Here's the knowledge is strictly confidential, limited to law enforcement only. Adult Protective Services does not have access to these reports or what's in them. And the rationale, of course, is national security, preserving law enforcement equities, et cetera. I'm moving as fast as I can. Here's the thing we're working on, and then I'm just going to wrap up. We are working on sparking some pilot EFE SAR review teams around the country. And right now, I won't say who or where exactly, but state of Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Massachusetts, Boston area are starting to gel with some activity around EFE SAR review teams. Also Southern California, San Francisco, and the North Bay. If any of you are from these areas and would like to talk more about it and you are law enforcement, please see us. Please introduce yourself so that we can, make connections and help guide development here. And this is going to be very interesting to see how this emerges. And hopefully we're thinking these will be underneath existing SAR review teams or attached to existing SAR review teams. So there's mentorship and support. And here, this is just a lot of resources, so I'm just going to flip through it real quick. Here's the advisory from FinCEN, and then this is our memorandum. And this is important for general training on a lot of different topics. We have a YouTube channel that has, how to form a network. It has speakers from all over the country, 13 different topics. The last one we just posted yesterday is on engaging faith community and multidisciplinary teams with two faith leaders, talking about what they have done in elder justice. It's really, so these are free, and they're available, and they're pretty popular. So it's a great way to just at your own pace and your own time, tap into a resource. And from there, you can see this is all available for you. And you've got all our information about CFPB. And if there's any questions, further questions or whatnot, come see us out at our table afterwards.
Thanks, Jennifer. And so I think we are going to go 5 minutes over, so we'll go to 11:05. But Rachel, I know we only have a couple minutes, so we'd like to give questions. So do you have a topic you can cover in, like, because Rachel is going to be back for the lunchtime session, so she's not leaving us. So do you have something that you can briefly cover in like 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions and then you can finish later?
Okay, so I think the most important thing is I'm with the Internet Crime Complaint Center, the FBI's reporting system for frauds and scams, intrusion based. I think the most important thing, and how do I advance here? They don't flip very quickly, but the most important thing that I do want to stress about the IC3 is our financial fraud kill chain. If you have a victim who comes to you and says, I sent a wire transfer, and now I realize this is a scam. The sooner you can report with us, the better a chance that we have of helping to freeze the funds. Here's a little screenshot of our fraud kill chain. When a complaint comes in, we have an algorithm that reads through complaints. We look at the transaction dates, we look at the dollar amounts, and then that automatically triggers our kill chain. We have a domestic and an international kill chain. Let me see the next slide. Yes, actually talks about the dollar amounts. This is last year's data. We're getting ready to publish our 2023 report, which will have those numbers in it. But we have a 73% success rate in freezing funds, and that allows time for law enforcement and for banks to file the paperwork necessary to recall those funds. Since this was started, we have frozen over $2.3 billion. And like I said, that really, we interact with the banks on a daily basis. We have contacts at our banks that will work with us to freeze those funds. And that allows time to file the necessary paperwork to maybe get those funds back for your victim. That's the most important thing I could tell you right now. Tune in for the next one.
So yeah, we'll hear more from Rachel later, but again, in terms of the takeaway, high dollar value loss by a victim, very recent, gotta go to IC3. The only way that this financial kill chain is going to kick into effect is if they report to ic3.gov. But if it's the very recent loss, then report it and maybe FBI can do something about it, right? That's what the victim wants to know, most importantly. So why don't we?
Second thing, because it was mentioned earlier about crypto. We do have resources on LEAP for those who have access to LEAP, cjus.gov. That is the law enforcement enterprise portal. There are trainings out there on how to trace crypto, on how to seize it. It's all out there. And these are self-paced. So if you start watching it and you have to go and leave, do something else, you can come back and pick up where you left off. There is also, assistance. And my email is, our email for IC3 assistance is actually at the end of this presentation. There's a little bit on virtual assets, but I'll make sure my email gets out there and our email gets out there if you need any help. But like I said, virtual currency, I know it's huge, it's confusing, but the Bureau is out there and we have a unit that's actually helping with this. So that's it.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm sorry for the short time, but we'll make up for it later. I will cede my time to you. So let's get questions for the group. Would love to hear Caitlin back.
So it varies. And we don't have anything set in stone because sometimes things, you might get a $10,000 wire transfer that's 10 days old and you might, we have somebody, law enforcement says, can we help? We'll try anything if it's requested of us directly. Now for complaints that come in the door, there are, we do have things just because we can't look at everything. We're a very small team. So right now it automatically triggers at 25K. But it could, but we'll go all the way up to 10 days sometimes. It depends. It really just depends. Some banks are also more flexible than others and more willing to help. And because of our relationships, we know which ones, that we can maybe push it a little bit.
Other questions? Yeah, one down here.
How does local law enforcement know if you have triggered that kill chain and we need to do what we need to do to get that money back?
So the way the kill chain works, when it comes in and it's triggered, our team will actually work with the banks to see what we can freeze. And then at that point, we will turn it over to the field offices who will actually work with the victims at that point. If in the complaint you have put that law enforcement has filed on behalf of the victim, they will also be reaching out to the locals that filed that complaint with them. And that's something else too that's really helpful, is that sometimes when locals are sitting down with a victim and taking their report, they are also filing an IC3 report at the same time, taking that same information from their reports from the victims and popping it into the form. So.
And again, Patty can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the nice things is if you do report to IC3, if it's a tech support fraud or a government imposter fraud or a lottery fraud, if the complaint comes into IC3, if it's a large value wire, then it could trigger the recovery asset team. And then that complaint is also fed by IC3 into Consumer Sentinel. Is that right?
We get about 10%, or actually about 10% of our data goes to Consumer Sentinel. We do have certain things that we can't send. So I think our last year estimate was maybe 10% of what we get in will go to Consumer Sentinel.
That's right. And also complaints that come in to report fraud, some of them get sent over to IC3 also.
So look, at the end of the day, if your victim can report both places, then there is a deconfliction that happens between them to make sure that they're not double counting complaints. However, again, if they want to take advantage of the recovery asset team as a potential, it would have to go into IC3. Other questions? So we are right on time, and I know we're right before lunch.